Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. Last session of the first day of the Southern Vermont Economy Summit. I'm just going to do some quick technical housekeeping. So we're currently in Zoom webinar. So as an attendee, you're able to raise your hand. You can send questions in the Q&A window and also use the chat box. Those are all at the bottom of your screen. We're keeping everyone muted. And if there are opportunities for attendees to ask questions verbally, it'll be at the end of the session. But I would ask that you either put your question in the question and answer or do the raise hand at the end, and we'll call on you to ask it verbally if that's what you're looking for. We have a intro from Senator Balint. So I'm going to go ahead and share that and then hand it over to Olga Peters after that.
Welcome to the Southern Vermont Economy Summit event. In conversation with Governor Scott and Lieutenant Governor Molly Gray, envisioning Southern Vermont's future and the future talks back, a young professionals town hall. I'm Senator Becca Balint and I serve Windham County. I'm the President Pro Tem in the Senate. And in the history of Vermont, we've never had a woman serve as President Pro Tem. I'm the very first one, which is hard to believe really, but there you are. I'm very proud to represent Southern Vermont in the Senate, and I'm delighted to be with you all today. Thank you for all that you do to make Southern Vermont a dynamic, vibrant place for all of us who love this landscape and its people. On April 29th, Mike Cutler of Catamount Access TV in Bennington interviewed the governor and lieutenant governor with recorded questions from young professionals across Southern Vermont. We'll intersperse interview footage with hearing directly from our young professional panelists who will have a chance to respond to the interview and provide their own perspective on envisioning Southern Vermont's future. I hope you were able to attend the New to Vermont lunch series just before this session, but because all sessions have been recorded, if you missed it, you can catch it later. Coming up tomorrow at 9 o'clock, we'll have a great panel and workshop entitled Reframing Growth, Vetting Our Values. It will be facilitated by the inimitable Ted Brady of the Vermont League of Cities and Towns and Catlin O'Shaughnessy Coffrin of Captivating Co. I'll now turn the program over to my colleague and friend, Representative Emily Kornheiser, who represents Brattleboro. She'll introduce our panelists and announce the 2021 Emerging Leaders. Welcome, Emily.
Welcome, Olga.
Hello, everybody. I am Olga Peters, and I'm stepping in for Emily, who is busy at the State House right now, or on State House duties, I should say. I am a reporter with the Commons, as well as the host and producer of the Montpelier Happy Hour that I co-host with Emily. So it is my honor today to recognize the emerging leaders and announce who has won the awards for this year, right before we jump to the panel. So these are the 2021 emerging leaders of Southern Vermont. This year presented enormous challenges, but it also offered unique opportunities for ordinary people to support their communities in crucial ways. The 2021 Emerging Leaders Recognition highlights those young professionals who went above and beyond during this unprecedented time for our generation. There were 64 nominations for 53 nominees. Of those nominations, a selection committee chose the top 20, and if we could see their names now, that would be wonderful. So thank you, everyone. And we want to thank all the emerging leaders who were named this year. Be sure to congratulate them when you see them in our community. And now I would like to introduce our panelists before we watch the first section of the interview. First up, we have Alex Figueroa, who is from the Southern Vermont Medical Center. Welcome, Alex. Beth Wallace from Bennington County Head Start. Thank you, Beth, for joining us today. Alyssa Pilo from Trend Business Solutions. Hello. Bob Davis of Brattleboro Savings and Loan. Hi, Bob. Amanda Normand from the Richards Group, as well as Tatiana of Beta Marco from Bennington College. So thank you for being with us today, Tatiana. And thank you for everyone who has joined the program today.
I see that Representative Kornheiser has joined us from her busy schedule. Emily, I don't know if you want to say a few words at all before we hop right into the interview.
Hello, thank you so much for having me here today. And I am sorry that this is the final 2 weeks of the legislative session. So I arrived a few minutes late, and much thank you to Olga for jumping in with all of this. I think this is a really exciting opportunity to hear from each of the panelists about what you imagine as the future of the Vermont economy and how each of you think about what leadership is required into the future, and to hear from a number of statewide leaders about what they think of as the future of the economy. It's fairly regularly in the legislature, someone will say on the floor or in committee, well, that's how economics works. And in fact, there is no one way that economics works. There might be ways that economic textbooks are written, but what we each need from our economy, what our communities need from our economy, what our businesses need from our economy, and each of our visions about how to accomplish that, I think are quite varied. And the more we can make those things transparent, the more we can negotiate them with each other, the more we can really find a collection of means that will get us to the ends of a vibrant Vermont that works for all of us. And so I'm so happy to be here with you all today, to listen to some of our statewide leaders reflect on the questions that you asked, and then to really dive into the dirty details with all of you about what those answers mean. And I really hope we can be honest about when we think we're just hearing politics and when we're really hearing policy that resonates for us. So looking forward to diving in today. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. And Casey is going to go ahead and share the first clip of the interview.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to In Conversation with Governor Scott and Lieutenant Governor Gray, Envisioning Southern Vermont's Future for the Southern Vermont Economy Summit. My name is Mike Cutler, and I'm with Cateron Access Television in Bennington, Vermont. As the 2021 legislative session winds down, let's hear from state leaders on what's next for Vermont and what it means for our region. Today's guests are Governor Scott and Lieutenant Governor Gray. Over the past few months, we've had young professionals submit questions to ask our state leadership about the future of the economy. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the conversation. Good morning, Lieutenant Governor Gray. Thank you for joining us this morning. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. Great to be here.
Yes, we're excited to have you and the governor as well. So thank you for taking some time to answer some of these questions that young professionals from the southern part of the state have sent in. So I think without further ado, we'll dive right in if that's all right with you.
Absolutely.
Awesome. All right, bear with me while I get them going here. Good morning, Governor. How are you this morning?
I'm fine. How are you?
Great. I'm fantastic. Thank you for joining us to answer some questions from some young professionals in Southern Vermont. And yeah, I think we'll just dive right in if you're all right with that.
I'm fine with that.
Excellent.
Hello, my name is Alex Figueroa, and I'm from Bennington, Vermont. My question for you is, what would you like to change in our state to make YPs of all colors and creeds feel safe?
Well, thank you very much, Alex. And it's a great question. You know, I've been very clear that I believe we need more people in Vermont, and I've been very clear that we need a lot more diversity in Vermont, which is why I called on both the Trump and Biden administrations to increase the number of refugee families sent to Vermont, and have worked to ensure more workforce recruitment, to include a special focus on helping more families of color relocate to Vermont. But we can't just call for more diversity. You know, that's not enough. We need to make sure Vermont is a welcoming, inclusive state. That takes all of us, each and every one of us, taking a look in the mirror and being honest about our own actions. We need to speak out against racism when we see it, and look closely at our systems to address the systemic racism that is here. We've been working on this, including through our Office of Racial Equity, which we recently created, but we know Vermont is not immune to this, and we have so much more work to do.
Hey there, my name is Jake Stone and I live in Bennington, Vermont, and I just wanted to video in, man, for one, just thank you for all that you do to lead us in this great state of Vermont. But I have a question for you, and that question is this. Vermont's wages are low compared to many New England states, which is really hard, you know, particularly hard given student loan burdens, cost of housing that we have here. And so I'm just curious, what specific policies are you pursuing to increase wages? Thanks.
Hi, Jake. Thank you so much for your question. And it's a really, really important one here in Vermont. I grew up in this state. I have student loan debt. I'm still working through it. And I've realized, and I think many Vermonters have realized, that it's impacted our ability to buy homes, to think about starting a family here. And it's true. You rightly pointed out, we do have low wages in Vermont. I do support, as President Biden announced recently, a federal raise of the minimum wage to $15 an hour. But I think we have to be really honest. It's not just about raising the minimum wage. It's about how many ways that Vermonters, young people in particular, chop up the paycheck. Student loan debt, mortgages, rent. I still rent. Up until recently, I was still renting. Prescription drugs, you name it, healthcare costs, childcare costs. We're asking Vermonters to do a lot with a little. And so my focus as Lieutenant Governor is trying to figure out how we can address some of those underlying costs, childcare, for example. So I've supported all efforts here in Vermont to make childcare more accessible and affordable. I support efforts to cancel student loan debt in some cases, and I think that that's been a pretty incredible national effort. But I'd also like to just take a moment and say, you know, here in Vermont, women still make 16 cents less on the dollar than men. On average, women make about $41,000 a year. It's about $8,000 less than men. So we also need to have equal pay if we're going to have a really just and equitable system in our state for everyone to succeed. But thank you for your question. It's such an important one. And again, I don't think it's simply a question of raising the minimum wage, but it's also about making sure we address a lot of those underlying costs so we can live and thrive here in Vermont.
Great. Yeah, it's certainly a tough topic. Doesn't just happen overnight. How does that work? Well, with everything, so everything jives well. So great. Thank you. All right, question number 3.
Hello, I'm Melissa Pilo from Brattleboro. Given the state's demographic realities, I wonder what opportunities and challenges you might see for younger people as Vermont's managerial class retires.
That's such a great question. Thank you, Melissa. And I love the mural background down in Brattleboro. This is one of my favorite questions, actually, and favorite topics. It's really thinking about the future of Vermont, right? What is it going to look like? Who's going to be at the table when we're having really important conversations about jobs or equity or innovation? In my mind, that is this generation. It's our 20-somethings, it's our 30-somethings, our 40-somethings, maybe 50-somethings too, if they're here at this Young Professionals Summit, but it's all of you. And as President Biden recently said about government's not something that's distant and should be far away from all of us. It's actually all of us. It is us, right? It is we the people. And I think the same has to be said and has to be true for the future of our communities. Who's at the table at our select board hearings or at our city council meetings leading, right? It's all of us, it's you. The same has to be said for a nonprofit. Nonprofits are boards and those who are leading, meeting the needs of our communities. It's you. The same is true for our businesses who offer a lot of incredibly essential services to our downtowns, right? From our restaurant leaders to our brewers, to our childcare providers, and so on and so forth. So when I look to the future, I really see that the Vermont that we want for the future has to include all of you, all of us, all young professionals, in helping to shape this place that we know, that we love, and that we want to thrive. So that's kind of a long and lofty answer to your question, but I believe it sincerely. That's why I'm in my office today, and my office door is open. I want to hear from you. I want to engage with you. I want to help build a really diverse and big table and give all of you a seat at the table as we think about the future of the state. Thank you for your question.
Nice. Awesome. That's great. Awesome. Great. We'll head on to the next one then.
Hello, Governor Scott. My name is Jonathan Cooper, and I'm a resident of Bennington. And Brigadier General John Stark and I are wondering, given the current conversations around pensions, what can be done to ensure the retirement and the promise made to retirees, current and future, without unduly burdening our younger taxpayers and workforce members today? Thanks very much.
Well, thank you, Jonathan, and seeing you there, it does bring a lot of fond memories of getting a chance to visit Bennington. So you didn't have to tell me where you're from. I got that from the background. But thank you very much for bringing up this really important issue. You know, our unfunded liability for our pensions has grown to about $5.7 billion, which means it continues to grow in recent years, even as we put hundreds of millions of dollars in to try and get ahead of it, and we haven't been able to. And to be clear, every year I've been governor, we more than met the obligations that's been set forth, and we paid a little bit more in advance, but it's just overwhelming us. We need to make sure whatever we do is sustainable moving forward, because right now it isn't. And this is a tough issue, but it's not just an issue for state employees and teachers. It's also an issue for taxpayers. And we can't expect taxpayers to shoulder this burden all by themselves. The bottom line is we're looking, just in this past year, we had a $100 million increase over the hundreds of millions of dollars we paid last year. And the payment continues to escalate, and it keeps going up every single year. And it's just not sustainable. So we've got to do something because that's money we could be using on economic development or actually reducing the tax burden, making Vermont more affordable, that I talk about a lot. So my administration, I have said, we've been talking about this issue for years. It's something we have to address. And I really appreciate Treasurer Pierce coming forward on this early in the year, and the legislature for taking an interest in this as well. But we can't just throw more money at the problem. We have to address those structural issues. As I've said, just as I had to take the lead on guns, which was unpopular, this is an issue the majority party in the legislature needs to take a leadership role on, or nothing else will happen. As I've told them, you know, I'm willing to be a partner. I'm willing to be at the table every step of the way. But if it's me leading this effort, it becomes political, and I'm in the minority. And I, you know, when I'm at the seat, have that seat at the table, I soon become the main course, and nothing gets accomplished. So I think we need to address this together, but there needs to be some leadership on the part of the legislature in order for this to to get solved. And I look forward to this happening over the next year because, again, this isn't going to go away. We can't just sweep this under the carpet. This is a major, major expense for the state.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Certainly a tough issue for everyone. So thank you for your answer, Governor. We'll move on to the next question. Now let's take a pause here and hear from our young professional panelists.
This is so fun. I feel like we're at the Oscars or something, the way it's like all spliced together. I'm realizing that I don't know if I fully introduced myself when we first started because I was sort of hopping from the last thing. So just want to say I'm Emily Kornheiser. I'm a state representative from Brattleboro. I'm vice chair of the Ways and Means Committee. So I think a lot about taxes and money and what it means for our lives. I was on the Commerce Committee before that. I really feel like our economy is sort of at the center of why our lives work or don't work in a lot of cases in Vermont. And Olga and I are going to be switching off today because one, we dance really well together, I think, and two, I might have to hop off and vote or speak on the House floor a couple times during this. So if you see us switch, know that we both consented to it and we're happy to be here with you. So I also want to say that as a politician, my patience for political speech is really low. And I really like people to say things and mean things and like get to the heart of the matter pretty quick. And so would love if, if we could sort of dive in with that frame. So my first question for all of you, like thinking about the answers to those questions and what Governor Scott and Lieutenant Governor Gray said, just want to name that deciding to work in Vermont has some real trade-offs. We have low wages compared to other surrounding states and certainly compared to metropolitan areas. Upward mobility can be really challenging because our businesses are so small and our organizations are so small, and opportunities sort of move between businesses within your field. And then there's a real lack of diversity, both in terms of sort of, racial diversity, ethnic diversity, cultural diversity, class, really just, I think a lot of us can struggle with that as well. So I'm wondering what you heard from these folks so far that you agreed with and what you think they really missed and was off the mark in their answers. And we're not going to hear from everyone. I'll probably call on 2 people. Feel free to raise your physical hand or your electronic hand or whatever works for you. And then we'll jump to the next question. Beth, go ahead.
So of course, coming from Head Start and early Head Start, childcare really resonates with me. Also because I am a mom. My daughter is now 11, so I'm kind of beyond those early childcare years, but I remember them really vividly. And I'm also someone who grew up in the Bennington area, left and came back. So I really benefited and knew the whole time that I was benefiting from my natural supports. I have a large family here. I've leaned heavily on my parents, on my husband's parents, on our extended family who were that safety net when my daughter was young and continue to be. And so many people don't have that. And especially because we're actively recruiting people to our area. I have staff who have young families. We're so glad that they chose Southern Vermont to start their young families, but really struggle. And I think we've seen that tenfold this past year with not having those natural supports. So I think it's really important for us as a community to be intentional about what are we doing to support those folks that we want here so desperately. And I think that also connects with the diversity issue and wanting to recruit folks. And, I heard Governor Scott say, we want more refugees, we want more diversity. It's not enough just to welcome welcome people. We also have to call out racism, but we also have to really be intentional about building our communities, making sure that we have the infrastructure to make them welcoming. I think about language a lot. It's something that my colleagues in Burlington at like CBOEO, they have their translation services set up. They have their applications and their paperwork in a lot of different languages. And I don't see that in our communities because we tend to have to scramble to find solutions when we encounter diversity, and our colleagues too. So I think that's like one small thing that we need to get a game plan around.
And I don't think those are small things. I think, you know, for one, it's, you know, we can do all this recruiting, but if someone doesn't have somewhere to get their hair done when they show up, like that's a real thing. And like, there's even a shortage of curly hair cutters, like let alone, you know, folks like African-American hair. And then also, I think when we're all working really hard to make a living, it can be really hard to even, if you do have natural supports, to have those natural supports be available if everyone's working 60 hours a week. Tatiana, I see you wanting to jump in here.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really want to piggyback on what Beth is saying. As someone who moved to Vermont 2 years ago for a job, and is a single mom, and then the pandemic hit, it really shined a light on, you know, what does it mean to have no support networks? It's a wonderful community here in Bennington, and you know, I was able to make some friends, but you know, when your kids are homeschooling and you are working a highly demanding job, and you know, it's just a lot to handle, and the pandemic really shined a light on that. And I think about that too, you know, again, echoing what Beth said when we talk about wanting to bring in more diversity, bring in more people. You know, I think that my privilege as a white woman here in Vermont made it easier for me to make friends. And that, you know, people who are new refugees who have that language barrier, people of color, there's been, you know, that the recent article in the VT Digger that was talking about how people who are Black, Asian, and Indigenous have been facing increased harassment, increased being pulled over by the cops, you know, this kind of antagonism towards people who are perceived as different. And, you know, one final thing I want to say is in our conversations about diversity, how we could be doing so much more here in Vermont to honor the diversity that already exists. In particular, our migrant farm workers. These are people who are here, who don't always speak English as their first language, come from Central and South America, and are denied basic human rights. And, you know, Migrant Justice, for example, has been working for years now to try to get Hannaford, which is a grocery store that many of us shop at, to just sign a basic human rights pledge, and they don't. So, you know, I think that a lot more could be said by our leaders about our complicity in the denial of rights, you know, when we, you know, kind of don't critique our police as much as we could, when we don't critique our big businesses as much as we could, that we're actually complicit in systemic racism. So thank you.
Thanks. Alyssa, I think you had something that you wanted to add.
Yep, and Tatiana and Beth, I definitely agree with what you have both said as well. And I thought that what the governor, you know, had said about getting refugees to come to our state, you know, I think that is, you know, a great step. But I felt like, in addition to what he said about recruiting the workforce, you know, I thought what was missing essentially was the fact that what we have existing is not substantial and sustainable. You know, the fact that we have people that are being recruited to live here is great, but to work remotely and getting paid to work remotely, you know, is one step to attract people. But then how is that sustainable? The lack of industry, I think, is, you know, what can be a big challenge here. You know, if there is an incentive or, you know, something to be put in place where different kinds of companies or businesses can be brought to Vermont, I think that can create an effective way to, you know, have more diverse people coming here, just some more opportunity for higher wages that they had talked about. And I think, that's one of the things that I felt was missing in a way. And I had done some work in consulting with an organization called Let's Grow Kids. And we went into different kinds of businesses in different industries and saw that, the benefits that they were offering within their existing companies were not substantial for families to thrive on, for childcare, being able to afford, certain basic benefits like that. So yeah, I wanted to point that out.
All right, folks. Thank you so much, Alyssa. Emily has just had to step away to vote, and so I am going to jump in for her. So I want to move on to the next question, sort of in this section, and that's about wages and how do they impact your life? What solutions do you see to either raising wages or finding other places to save money or change costs that might make your lives a little easier? What do you see as a political or economic solution to the wage issue? And what could your employers do to help the issue? And whoever would like to jump in, I'd love to hear from you. Anybody?
Okay, if I take this
Yes,
one?
please. Go ahead, Bob.
I was just going to respond to the wage question. I work with in my job, I work with a lot of businesses here in Southern Vermont. Sometimes we see their struggles with hiring people and paying them enough money, at the same time to also make sure their business survives. So, as I think about a wage increase and if it's a significant one, my worry is, are these more rural businesses going to be able to survive if it all happens at one time? And I think it's important too, I know Lieutenant Governor touched some on other benefits like healthcare. So I'm just trying to think of ways that we can increase wages at the same time, also increase health benefits, so employees can take a look at their overall compensation package and, find value in the things like affordable healthcare. And as it compares to other states, I mean, living right next to, New Hampshire and Massachusetts and New York, we're competing to get employees from those areas as well. So trying to come up with a fair wage that can, support people here in Vermont is certainly a big issue. My worry is just how it'll impact some of the smaller businesses.
Thank you so much. Before we go to the next panelist, what I find interesting about what you just said, Bob, is, when you look at our wages, they have stayed low compared to the rest of the New England for so long that it's almost like we have to catch up before we actually even meet the other states around us. And so thank you for what you shared as far as the conundrum. Amanda or Alex, you haven't shared anything yet. Alex.
Yeah, I want to talk about the wages too, and I'll kind of piggyback off what Bob had said. And so I want to really focus more on kind of my field in terms of healthcare and human services, particularly those that kind of work as, direct support professionals or, home health aides or the work that they do, it's very low wage, right? And so, I mean, there's a huge national crisis in human services, and because part of the wage, and you have a lot of jobs, not just through the state of Vermont that are available, but nationwide. And so being able to try to increase those wages where you can, have folks be able to work comfortably, and because many of those folks work 2 or 3 jobs, right, and have kids, and so I really hope that for at least from my standpoint, there could be more focus on trying to increase the wages in those particular professions and fields.
Thank you, Alex. In the interest of time, how about we move on to the next section, unless Emily, you want to add anything?
No, I really appreciate how folks are thinking about wages as something that's sort of raising wages, something broader than just raising the minimum wage, that there are lots of different ways for us to be focused on wage increases. And want to encourage audience members and actually panelists who didn't have a chance to speak to put anything into the Q&A box or to the chat box for us to either for you to be speaking to each other or for us to be bringing up after the session. We're going to try to keep each Q&A to 15 minutes. So we have 15 minutes, a little less than 15 minutes of watching interviews, and then a little bit more than 15 minutes of having conversation, so we can sort of move through this together. Thank you.
Professional panelists.
Hi, my name is JD Gregorio from Brattleboro, Vermont. With the influx of new residents fueled by the pandemic, home ownership has become substantially more difficult for lower class, middle class, and even some upper middle class Vermonters to feasibly achieve. What is the Scott administration currently doing or planning to do to make home ownership an equitable option for all Vermont residents? What can you commit to for housing policies being created or adapted to achieve this goal?
Well, thanks very much for the question. It really does come right after the last question, and it's almost some of the same answers. But I'm glad you asked about this, in particular about affordable housing, and particularly for those working Vermonters. This has been a top priority for me since I came into office, and it continues to be one today. As you might remember, in 2017, I proposed and I worked with the legislature to pass a $37 million housing bond that leveraged almost $65 million in private assets to make it, at the time, the single biggest investment in housing the state has ever seen. We thought $100 million was incredible for the state, and it brought hundreds of new units online around the state. We're still seeing the benefits of that as we speak. So we saw the need. It didn't fulfill the need. So that's why we're presenting some other initiatives as well. We also invested over the last few years in a program called VHIP. This helps small landlords revitalize some of their vacant rental units, which has been really, really successful. Now, again, with the $1 billion in ARPA money given to the states to invest in recovery, I proposed $250 million. That's 2.5 times what we had initially, which we thought was the single largest investment in housing we've ever seen, which it was. This could really make a dent in the problem. This historic investment will include permanent housing for the homeless. So to put this in context, over the last year or so, we've spent $70 million for temporary housing in hotels and motels for the homeless. And this was, as we know, and what we realize today more than ever, this was just a Band-Aid during the crisis. What we really need is permanent housing. But it also focuses on creating more housing for that missing middle you discussed. In total, so think about this. In total, if the legislature supports this much needed initiative, which we all should agree on, we've all talked about it, we could bring 5,000 units to the market by the end of 2024. This would be transformational. I mean, this is huge and a big step forward on making Vermont more affordable, bringing more families and workers to Vermont, and protecting the most vulnerable. I have to admit, I've been a little disappointed to see the legislature hesitating on this critical investment, because we all agree this is a priority. So I hope if you agree that you'll let your legislators know, because again, I think this is an area we can all agree on.
So very important. Thank you for the answer, Governor. All right, we'll go to the next question.
Hi, I'm Jillian Williams from Newfane. It seems to me that while a noble goal, stimulating the state's economy and attracting young families to the region is going to be nearly impossible without creating some sort of infrastructure to support those families and that economic growth. So particularly in the southern half of the state, there is no housing to support an influx of middle income working families. So not only are there very few affordable houses to buy, but there are very few affordable houses and apartments to even rent. So my question is, how do you propose we approach this housing problem across the state, but particularly in the southern counties? Thank you.
I think we have to be really honest. So this is such an important question about housing. We have to be really honest about the housing crisis here in Vermont. We spend a lot of time and money investing in initiatives to draw young people, to draw new families to Vermont, right? We need to grow our population and our workforce, right? I agree with the governor that it's not about raising taxes, it's about having more taxpayers so we can have a really thriving state. But we don't, as we kind of make some of those investments and really, exciting initiatives to draw people here, also think about the infrastructure that's needed to make it possible to thrive here, housing being top among those infrastructure investments, and I'd say broadband as well. So what we know now is that we've seen an influx of people coming to Vermont. The census shows that, but even the last year, if you're in southern Vermont, you've seen that, right? You've seen that in Jamaica, you've seen that in Dorset, you've seen that around Mount Snow. You've seen a lot of towns grow and drive up the cost of housing. There are a lot of low and middle income families in the state that are now being priced out of the housing market. So what are we going to do about it? There's a couple proposals that have been put forward. One, nationally, the American Jobs Plan includes about 90 million, 90 million in affordable mixed, the Affordable Jobs Plan includes includes funding for 2 million homes and commercial buildings for preservation, building also, and for retrofitting. But importantly, here in Vermont, there's funding for 90 million in affordable mixed income housing. This is something like 5,000 new homes that should go on, or new units should go on the market by 2024. I think this is the largest investment in the state's history in housing. So these are two, I think, critical steps. One, this national effort to address housing, and then two, the effort here in Vermont with the existing proposals to invest in housing for middle income Vermonters. But the truth is, this is something I think that we have to look at a town by town basis, do an assessment of the homes that currently exist that need to be weatherized and need to be made more safe. Also look at where there's opportunities for really strategic public-private partnerships to invest in housing at the local level. The Putnam Block project is a wonderful example, and I know there's other projects in Brattleboro that allow for CCV to exist and housing, especially housing for some of our older Vermonters and housing that's fully accessible. So capturing some of our lessons learned and being really, really strategic in the investments we make now, but making sure it's all grounded in a community-focused needs assessment. So we're working with communities every step of the way.
Hi, my name is Candace Pearson in Brattleboro, Vermont. So many people come or stay here because of the quality of life. What can we do to make our communities more livable, walkable, and accessible?
Thank you, Candace, for the question. This pandemic, as you know, has attracted a lot of people to our state because they've seen how well we've handled the pandemic, and we are now known as the healthiest, safest state in the nation. Now we just have to seal the deal to keep them here. They're here now, but we need to keep them here. So we need to make Vermont more affordable and focus on our communities in particular, specifically our downtowns and village centers, and especially in the 12 to 13 counties that are in need. Now, again, the northwest part of our state is doing okay. They could be doing better, but they're doing okay. but I worry about the other 12 to 13 counties, and I see them in some of my trips around the state. We really have a need there. It's like everyone's left behind. So as I mentioned before, housing is a huge part of this, and we know there's tremendous need. Investing in affordable housing for the working class will go a long way to enable people to stay. On broadband as well, the pandemic has shown us that many people can work almost anywhere. They don't need to live in another big city somewhere across the United States. They can reside and stay right here, but they need high quality, affordable broadband. So investing in this area will go a long way as well. And by focusing on our downtowns and village centers and supporting smart growth, we can make them more livable and accessible. Now, my ARPA proposal that I talked about just a few minutes ago focuses on shovel-ready projects that will help do just that.
Hi, I'm Maggie Batari from Brattleboro. What can we tell folks who want to start a family here in Vermont, and what are some of the pros and cons about raising a kid here?
Hi, Maggie. Thanks so much for your incredible question. I'd like to say that sort of the good and the bad, right? We'll start with the bad, and then we'll talk about the good. The bad in Vermont is that on average, families pay $20,000 a year for childcare in the state. That's an incredible amount of money. We just talked about our wages and them being pretty low in the state. We don't have paid family and medical leave. And if you're the sandwich generation, which I think many of us are, I'll admit that I'm 37, and it's caring for aging parents or aunts or uncles, and also thinking about starting a family or taking care of kids at the same time. We're really stuck in the middle in a state that doesn't have paid family and medical leave. So I'm a huge supporter of the American Families Plan that President Biden recently announced, and all efforts here in our state to make childcare affordable using the American Rescue Plan funds and the American Jobs Plan funds, which hopefully will be passed by Congress and come to Vermont. But we have to address those underlying costs. And for example, the American Families Plan would create a situation whereby if you're a low or middle income family, you wouldn't spend more than 7% of your income on childcare. We'd also have a comprehensive, national, and competitive paid family and medical leave plan, giving workers up to 12 weeks of paid leave, which is huge. That would be really, really huge for Vermont. So I'm 100% supportive of those. And I think that's sort of the bad and the potential for good in the state. But there's one other thing we do need to address. The recent census came out, and Vermont remains one of the least diverse or whitest states in the country. That's not something I think we need to be proud of. What we need to be proud of is efforts day in and day out to address systemic racism, to make our communities more welcoming, more diverse, more inclusive. This means taking a real look at access to education, access to healthcare, access to housing and loans in Vermont, so that as we grow our population and as we work to grow our workforce, which we need to do, right, as one of the oldest states in the country, we do so in a way that promotes equity, that promotes diversity. And I think that's an area of tremendous growth and opportunity for Vermont.
Well said, Lieutenant Governor, well said. All right, great. Moving right along to the next question.
Hi, my name is Frances Huntley and I'm from Brattleboro. What do you imagine for our downtowns as more of us work remotely?
Hi, Frances. Thank you so much for your question. And it's such an important one. We still don't know yet all the ways this pandemic has changed us, right? Changed us in the way that we access education or remote work through internet or broadband, which I'd love to talk a little bit more about and we have to address. But specifically when it comes to our downtowns, we've seen a shift of restaurants providing takeout and ordering services online, a lot of businesses providing goods and services through this sort of digital world. And I think the temptation sometimes as consumers to say, well, I know Amazon, so maybe that's the easiest way to purchase a product. I think to ensure that our downtowns can thrive and can be really competitive in this 21st century economy, that I think will remain somewhat online even as we come out of this pandemic and open up our communities and businesses again. And because of that, we do have to make really strategic and important one-time investments in our infrastructure, broadband being top among those investments. Through the American Rescue Plan and the good leadership of Senator Leahy, Congressman Welch, and Senator Sanders, Vermont has, I think, something like 1.13 million coming to the state for broadband in particular. The governor has put forward a very, very robust broadband plan that I support that really focuses on our communication union districts, these really robust nonprofits across the state that are deploying fiber to homes. But the truth is we can't do that soon enough. I mean, it has to happen immediately, right? You've all experienced it over the last year, trying to get online, trying to remote work, probably trying to access telehealth or counseling appointments, you name it, everything about our world is now online. And so not only do we need to work to build that permanent long-term infrastructure, but I also strongly support emergency short-term solutions to ensure that every Vermonter can get online as soon as possible, which maybe we need to be a little bit creative and realize that it's going to take some time to deploy fiber. And the only other thing I would say is that as we look at our downtowns for the future and also remote work, I think these community co-working spaces that we have across the state, our generator spaces, our innovation centers really need to receive our investment and our support as we really think about work in a different way. The ability to come together in downtowns, to start businesses, to launch initiatives, to really look at community needs and do that in a way that doesn't require a lot of capital to start a business. So with that, I think our greatest investments have to be broadband and having our businesses be able to thrive online, encouraging consumers to still purchase locally, even if they're doing it online, and then create more opportunities for innovation, idea generation, business generation, and community co-working.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree. Broadband is so critical. Yes, absolutely. 100% there. So thank you. Now let's take a pause here and hear from our young professional.
I love that transition moment where like the voice gets a little deeper and the screen gets a little darker and we're like coming out into the light together here. So housing, we have a housing crisis in Vermont across every single slice of our housing market, which is actually fairly unusual. So we have a profound shortage of public housing. We have a profound shortage of sort of technically affordable housing, which means housing for folks sort of in the bottom quintile of the of income. We have a shortage of housing that's just affordable, like normal, like just straight up affordable that any of us can afford. We have a shortage of housing for older folks to move into, and we had some comments in the chat about what sort of older housing looks like. We have folks who are staying in their 5-bedroom homes because of that. And so then we have folks who can't find family housing because the people in the family, like the larger family housing, don't have an option for themselves. And so we then have health risks from that because the folks in these larger homes are still like shoveling the ice and going up and down the stairs when they don't want to. And then we put a lot of energy into housing for our tourism market because our economy is so dependent on that. And I am not telling you all anything that you don't already know. But what I have been, and housing is probably one of the biggest challenges that drives me in my work because I think it eats up a huge amount of each of our incomes. It causes a lot of stress. I think it keeps us from some of the social and family supports that I remember Beth and Tatiana really talking about a lot in our first round. If our housing can be safe and secure, we can sort of invest in our neighbors in a really different way. We can get to know our neighbors. We had a question in the chat about housing that really invests in our town and village centers. And that's a lot of thinking around that. It's conservation, it's conserving our wild and our farmland and preventing speculation on that. but it's also making sure that we are, when we do invest in developing housing, we're doing it in ways that will build strong communities so people can care for their neighbors the way Vermonters are really proud of, but don't always quite live up to that pride. And so that we can have as low an environmental impact as possible. So I was originally from New York, and so I still read the New York Times every morning because that's how I grew up. And I have this theory that the apocalypse is going to come and I won't know about it until I read the newspaper, which is ridiculous. But one thing that I've been enjoying in there is the mayoral races in New York. I don't know how many other people are following them, but one interesting thing came up. Everyone running in the Democratic primary for mayor, I promise I'll get to the point soon, was asked by the New York Times editorial board how much they thought an apartment in Brooklyn would cost or a home in Brooklyn would cost. And two of the Democratic candidates running for mayor of New York City said that they thought a family could purchase a home in Brooklyn for around $100,000. These were not like fringe candidates. So I set myself to thinking, I wonder how many of my colleagues in the Vermont legislature know the housing market in Vermont as intimately as I do, and as perhaps all of you do, you young professionals who might be navigating this freshly and regularly in a way that perhaps some of my older colleagues don't. And so all of that crisis piled upon crisis, awareness existing in very different places. Do you all think this problem is solvable? And what would a solution possibly look like? Tatiana, jump on in.
Yeah, I think about this a lot because I currently live in rental housing here in Bennington. I have a lot of friends who are looking for housing, middle income folks, and it's insane. It's like houses are going for more than their asking price. They're going for cash offers, and a lot of it's people from out of state who are taking advantage of the relatively lower priced housing. But here in Bennington, our wages, you know, this is high priced housing for us, but you know, for someone who maybe lives in an urban area but has switched to remote, it's very cheap. So this is my reality because I'm, you know, hoping to start looking for a house to buy in the next few months. And one of the things I've thought about is how, you know, the state, I would love to see the state kind of working on loans and different ways of restructuring loans to do things like rehab these, you know, we see so many old and falling down houses in the area, to rehab those houses to make it easier to get a mortgage that includes the rehab costs, and also to split houses into units. Because for a family of, you know, me, I'm a mom with 2 kids. I don't need a whole house. I you know, I need 3 bedrooms, but square footage wise, 1,000 square feet would be great. And a lot of these big houses are, you know, can be double or triple that. And so I would love to just see some like creative investment and some ways that the state government could support just, you know, for me to get a mortgage for a huge house and then break it into 3 rental units and live in one, something like that.
So before I go over to Beth, and wonder if anyone other than Beth who hasn't spoken yet would also like to speak. And say that we actually are investing in programs just like that. So we have loan programs for folks who want to do rehab. We have some really good first-time homebuyer programs, but the price of housing is still the price of housing, and it is significant. And one thing that I was really excited about this session was some opportunities to look at the property transfer tax. We've had a few comments and questions about how we can sort of use taxes in order to better serve some of these challenges. And so look at how we tax the transfer of homes that cost more than $1 million and properties that cost more than $1 million, and move that money into funding housing for that's more affordable, not necessarily technically affordable, but more affordable for each of us. Amanda.
So I was good. Okay, I'm unmuted, sorry. So I was going to just piggyback off of what Tatiana was saying about having the possibility of looking at already built infrastructure and splitting it into units that would be more affordable housing. We also talked a little bit, or we heard the video and questions about what was going to happen to the downtown areas. with so many companies, not necessarily the storefronts, but some other businesses that had commercial real estate in downtown locations that are now looking at possibly shifting to working remote or more so remote. Wouldn't that also open up the opportunity to maybe use some of that infrastructure in that building to split up into housing to create more housing? I'm not sure if that's a feasible option, but that would be something that may be very helpful for helping the housing crisis. But again, it would depend on the cost and everything like that. So yeah.
Thanks. And I think we are going to go to Olga for actually the next question. I wish we had, like, I don't know, we were just doing this all day together, maybe even in real life. I think we can go deep on each of these issues.
I know, so much great information and thoughts are coming to the surface. What I'd really love to hear from panelists is, we've been talking a lot about, there's a lot of numbers being thrown around about money that's coming to the state and also what people would like to see in their towns. So I would love to hear from you. What are some specific places you would like to see investments to go? You mentioned the loan programs, but are there other things you'd like to see to make our communities more walkable, more livable, more affordable, that type of specific programming? Beth, Alyssa, Alex, Bob?
Yeah, so this past year I've been working on a project that is an expansion of our municipal recreation center. We've built on an early childhood education center there, expanding childcare slots, creating large community space, improving the community and the neighborhood with playgrounds, right? So we didn't have an infant, toddler, or a preschool playground in downtown Bennington until we built this facility. We've also created jobs. We put in a community kitchen. But what I'm so excited about are the playgrounds, right? And we have a little trike track, and we don't open until the end of June. But kids are already playing, and families are coming together. They can't wait to get on it. So we see them there in the afternoons. I think Vermont really is known for our outdoor recreation. We're really lucky in Bennington to have an amazing trail system. The Bennington Area Trails Network takes really great care of them. Our hospital is a great partner in investing in those activities and those resources that contribute to social determinants of health. And I think so much of it comes down to partnerships, right? Like, we have to be really innovative with our partnerships. A municipality partnering with Head Start to create this center and work through 90-year leases and things like that is something that's not very common. And I think Vermont is especially poised to do that because of our smallness and our tight communities. That's where we really shine, right, is in partnerships. So whatever comes down the line, that we're working together and that we have everybody at the table to figure it out. The other thing I just wanted to say in response to Tatiana is, my brain was pinging about rehab projects too. We bought a house 3 years ago, right before the prices went through the roof, thank God. But we didn't qualify for any of those first-time homebuyer programs because our income was too high. But we never got to save for a down payment because we went from student loan debt to childcare costs to high health insurance costs, right? So the one program we qualified for was this down payment assistance loan through NeighborWorks of Vermont. They also have great workshops that would teach people how to do their own small rehab projects, because it's also really hard to find small contractors right now. And wouldn't that be a great community project, right? If we had some funding behind those rehab projects, that we had skill building for young professionals, that maybe we had retiree mentors. I got really excited about that idea.
Thank you so much, Beth. Anyone else want to chime in before we move on?
I just want to chime in, is that in addition to the workshops that Beth was just talking about, there are workshops for first-time homebuyers that you can access through any of your regional housing trust agencies. So Wyndham Windsor Housing Trust over here in Brattleboro, that are really helpful, and you don't have to be buying through them. They can really just help you understand the process.
Thanks, Emily. Shall we go on to section 3? All right.
Professional panelists.
Hi, I'm Nancy Koziel from Bennington. With the craft beverage industry being a large contributor to the economy and tourism in Vermont, would you support legislative changes to modernize our alcohol restrictions and make Vermont competitive with other states? For example, changing the department's antagonistic relationship toward Vermont alcoholic beverage producers, lowering restrictions on low alcohol products, treating vermouths, ports, and sherries as wines, not spirits, allowing direct-to-consumer spirit shipping, even so far as privatization of spirits distribution. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Nancy. Yeah, we have some work to do in this regard. And I think, again, we have a great opportunity over the next few years to modernize in several different areas, including this sector alone. We know it's an important part of Vermont's brand, and the market is changing all the time, and we need to keep up with it if we're going to succeed. I just appointed a new deputy commissioner to the Department of Liquor and Lottery, Wendy Knight, who previously served as our state tourism and marketing commissioner. So she not only understands my vision, but she has a really good perspective on the opportunities in this industry. And I do think we need to try out a few new things, like direct to consumer shipping out of state specifically is something that we're looking at closely. I also support allowing RTDs, that's that ready to drink beverage, to be sold in stores just like you do beer and wine. Right now, they're treated like our other controlled liquor, hard liquor. But we've made this presentation to the legislature for their consideration. We'll just have to wait and see where this goes with them. The bottom line is, like in every area of government, we need to be nimble, we need to be willing to adapt, and we need to be ready to embrace a changing economy and take advantage of new opportunities.
Great. Thank you for your answer. All right. We'll head on to the next question.
Hello, Governor Scott, Lieutenant Governor Gray. My name is Nathan Russell. I'm in Arlington, Vermont. Thank you so much for taking the time and taking my question today. My question has to do with electrical infrastructure. As we move forward as a clean energy state, we're going to face challenges with electric vehicles, cold climate heat pumps, increasing the load on our current electrical infrastructure. I wanted to ask you how the state plans to not only develop the workforce in the area, but also to meet the challenges of increased electrical demand. How do you see that plan rolling out over the next few years? Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan, for your question. And again, it's wonderful to be in Southern Vermont and virtually at this Young Professionals Town Hall. I love that one of the themes is the future talks back. And I just want to commend you all for putting together this incredible summit and forum. I'm delighted to be here. To Nathan's question, I think it's such an important one as we think about the future of the state and this sort of global, national, and statewide movement that we're in when it comes to mitigating the impact of climate change in our communities and building our workforce and incredible job opportunities here in the state. We just heard about the American Jobs Plan nationally that will invest billions of dollars in infrastructure to support the rollout of electric vehicles across this country. Here in Vermont, there are proposals moving forward in a state that already does have some infrastructure around supporting electric vehicles, but to make sure that it's possible for every Vermonter over time to purchase an electric vehicle, to be part of this green revolution that we're having in the state, and to be able to do that in a way that also grows our workforce. And what do I mean by that? We see increased investments in weatherization. Both the legislature and the governor have put forward a number of proposals using the American Rescue Plan funds to be able to weatherize our homes across Vermont, again, to support electric vehicles, to support cold weather heat pumps. So from my perspective, this is a moment where we need to encourage young people coming out of high school, coming out of college to to access and to join a workforce that is really going to be on the forefront of changing the way we weatherize our homes, we get around the state, and we work to mitigate the impact of climate change on our communities. So thank you, Nathan, for that great question.
Great, yeah, great question. And I know he works at Power Guru, so he's in that world all the time, so it's pretty fun. So great. We'll hop on to question number 2.
Hi, Governor Scott and Lieutenant Governor Gray. I'm Ethan Shoemaker from Westover. Towns are getting recovery money. What are some ways towns can spend that money to best support young professionals? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ethan. I think it's important for everyone just to be aware, first of all. We haven't received any of the money yet, and we're still waiting for guidance from the Treasury on exactly how the money can be used, including for municipalities, and how it can be, some of the restrictions that we know are going to be surrounding some of the allotment. So stay tuned on that. I believe they have said the first part of May, they hope to get these guidelines out to us. But we received, just so again everyone understands, in the ARPA package, the American Recovery Plan was about $2.7 billion in total, but we had about $1 billion of that which is flexible. The rest is directed to different entities, and that includes the municipalities, but they have to have the guidelines in order to know what to do with it. But when you think about that $1 billion that we have that's a little bit flexible, we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to make strategic, transformative, and tangible investments on priorities we all share. We know what they are. We've been trying to address them for decades and haven't been able to because we haven't had the resources. So we have the opportunity right now to build out a more prosperous and equitable future for our state. And we have 4 years to allocate the money. That's the other. There's a little bit of flexibility in timing, so that's good news. But I feel strongly that we owe it to Vermonters to get the most value out of every penny of this funding, the best return on investment, or saving money in the future, which means being transparent and developing a plan. We have to have this plan. Think of this as a new large-scale housing development, for instance. If you decide you wanted to build, 100 homes, brand new development, you don't just build it one house at a time without a master plan, because you won't know, the sizing of the utilities, the elevations, where the roads are going, how they're interconnected, and you'll waste a lot of money as a result. So I believe we have to use this to put us on a better path in the future. And that means we can't repeat, those past mistakes we've made, and invest in ongoing programs that we won't be able to sustain or afford in the future. So I propose spending this money in 5 critical areas. First of all, broadband. We all agree, this pandemic has shown us that access to broadband is an economic necessity in the 21st century. We all agree with that, but we haven't been able to. Many administrations, many governors have promised, that they are going to have more broadband, but haven't been able to deliver it because it's cost hundreds of millions of dollars. This is something we've known for years, but again, it's become more apparent during the pandemic. And now we have the funding to really make a difference. So I'm proposing, out of the $1 billion of flexible money, that we take $250 million of that to expand rural broadband so that every corner of the state is connected. The next bucket, the second initiative, housing. Housing has been a long-standing challenge for the state, especially for young professionals. I hear this all the time. What would keep you in the state? When I ask them after they graduate, and they say a good paying job, a career opportunity, and decent affordable housing. So I'm recommending about another $250 million for the single largest housing investment in our state's history. This could build more than 5,000 housing units to help middle-income families who've been priced out of the market and help those who are struggling with homelessness as well. Now, another area is climate change mitigation. We know climate change is real, and climate change is a threat to our planet, but also our economy. My plan invests $200 million, by far the largest climate investment in our state's history, to help reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and enhance resiliency. We also know that many communities are struggling with aging or non-existent water, sewer, and stormwater infrastructure, and they can't afford to build it on their own. It's a barrier to economic growth for many communities around the state, something we frequently heard when we've been out on our Capital for a Day events. It can be the one thing holding a community back from more housing, new businesses, jobs, and a vibrant community. My proposal provides $170 million to make these critical investments, improving quality of life, attracting economic opportunities, while also reducing pollution and cleaning up our lakes, streams, and waterways. Finally, I'm also proposing $143 million for economic development, helping those struggling small businesses who've been hit hard by the pandemic so they can rebuild and recover.
Now let's take a pause here and hear from our young professional panelists.
Ooh, I really want to get into a tit for tat with some of those remarks, but I am not going to, because that is not why we are here today together. But I will say that I think comprehensive planning, goal setting, investing upstream rather than spending downstream is some of the best work we can do. And we have some financial abundance right now to really get it done. So I am excited that everyone else seems to want that too. So I want to go back to the earlier side, and there was a very detailed question about liquor laws. And then there was a less detailed question and answer about investing in green energy infrastructure and jobs. And ask all of you, what do you think the appropriate role for government is when it comes to emerging industries? Are there things that the governor and lieutenant governor said that made sense to you? Are there things that made less sense? You know, we have a few industries in Vermont that are like, you know, precious little babies like the beer. And then some more industries that are incredibly like robust in Vermont, like captive insurance that no one really ever talks about. So curious from each of you, like what is the appropriate role for government in supporting an emerging industry? Thank you, Bob, for thinking that's an interesting question. Floor is yours.
I guess, you know, when I think of emerging industries, you know, they're different. Sometimes we're scared of them because there's no rules or regulations and we're not quite sure, you know, after they've been in place for a while, how's it going to look 5, 10 years down the road. So I do think there is some type of role that government needs to play in establishing, you know, policies and procedures to make sure these industries operate in a safe way, and also, you know, keep Vermont the way it is. You know, we all live here because Vermont is, you know, a nice place to live. The scenery is nice, so we want to make sure the emerging industries don't change that in how we all see Vermont. But I also think we have to look ahead, and we don't want to, you know, New Hampshire and Massachusetts and New York even. I mean, if we are open to supporting these emerging industries, other states likely will, so they can attract new businesses there and employees there. So I think it's important we try to be proactive, and you know, government plays a proactive role to you know, establish some of those policies. And even going down further, I think towns have to play you know, a role as well in order to incentivize some of those emerging industries to open up in their towns and you know, support their downtowns. So I'm glad to hear there's you know, support for that out there, and I hope we can continue to move in that direction because the younger generation, if that's who we're trying to attract here to Vermont, they have much different interests than our parents' generation did. A lot of times it's in those new industries because it's new and exciting. So I hope we can continue to look forward on those.
Thanks. One thing I think about a lot is how a lot of new industries are sort of exciting and sexy and emerging because they disrupt something. And we often talk about disruptors in this really positive way, but they also often disrupt labor laws and disrupt tax policy in a way that I think might remove from our quality of life. And so we need to really think about what positive regulation looks like to make sure that we're supporting those industries to grow while making sure that Vermonters' needs and safety is met. And I think you really sort of approached that when you were talking about the environmental concerns. Anyone else want to add to that, or should we jump to the next question? Cannabis industry, another emerging industry people are really excited about. I'm working on the fee structure for that earlier this morning. I'm sure most of us have taken field trips to Massachusetts just to see what that future might look like, if not to purchase anything. And with that, I'm going to go to Olga for the next question.
Thank you so much, Emily. And I loved what you said about what disrupts and what do we want disrupted and what we don't. And this brings me to this question. We've been talking a lot of big picture money that's coming from the federal government, but there's also the money that's coming to the towns through some of the COVID relief funding. And so for all of you here, what could your towns do? What do you need them to invest in? Or what changes do they need to make either on a policy level or on an infrastructure level to support you as young professionals? Tatiana.
So a lot of the work that I do at Bennington College is around addressing food insecurity and also supporting our local food system. And the towns can do a lot, actually, in that regard, especially having people in town government who are specifically responsible for farm to school, helping to facilitate local businesses that cater to local foods and also provide food access to food insecure individuals. And so, there's a bridge that can be made there. And I think, in my dream world, all Vermont towns have a food systems person, just as they would have any other member of town government. So that's my plug.
Fantastic, thank you. Who else would like to jump in?
I just wanted to say, support around something like Chamber of Commerce, I think could be so effective, especially with young professionals, coming out of school and, maybe wanting to start their own business or start to help and recruit people to come and, live where they are, if they're really thriving and want to, create more of a community. I think getting some more support financially from organizations like that, can they provide resources for young professionals to start businesses and provide more information on, what kinds of barriers you might run into if you're starting a business, or also, if maybe you are working remotely for a business outside of Vermont and you want more of a network of the other people who are working remotely in your town, are there incubator type spaces that can be created so that, we can network with other people and then maybe even create something new. And also there's so much, community type, events and artists and so many great parts of living, in Vermont that I think, can be celebrated through an organization like a Chamber of Commerce and is such a great recruiting tool.
Thank you, Alyssa. I would just like to drill down into a little bit what you said. You mentioned the words resources for young professionals through the chambers. When you think of resources, are you thinking something specific like grants or professional development, skill building, or like filling out documents? Like, where do you feel the best focus would be?
Yeah, I think in resources, in terms of like you said with the grants, I think making sure that if there's a grant that is available, or provided, that there's a lot of information out there as part of a recruiting tool. It's something that businesses can use to recruit new employees. They can provide that information and say, our Chamber of Commerce has a grant, for creating something in the community, and I think having that information available, can keep people informed. And yeah, I think that definitely nails it on the head. But also just, resources in terms of information, having what does it take to open a business? If I'm interested in doing that, what do I need to do? Who do I go to, talk about something like that? And I think, like you said, with education, is there any sort, is there a grant around an education course that can be taken?
Thank you. Anyone else?
I just want to shout out to Jessica in the chat. She has so many great ideas, and one of the things I was seeing she was tipping was involving youth, right? So in the chamber, in the YPs, in town select board meetings, are we hearing from youth? Do we have, that as an agenda item to hear from different groups at the high schools or the middle schools? I love that idea. Because
I could pipe in on that one because it's a great one. Brattleboro a few years ago voted to change the town charter to allow youth 16 and 17-year-olds to vote in local elections. And the Vermont House just approved that charter, and it's over to the Vermont Senate for them to look at it next year. But that's a really great opportunity. They're also the Agency of Human Services, and in partnership with the legislature, has created a statewide youth council, which is a really great opportunity so that if your organization has sort of some questions they'd like the youth perspective on, you can bring in youth from your community, but you can also turn to that youth council. Because I find we have such incredible volunteerism in Vermont, and I think sometimes it gets us spread a little thin. Everyone wants like the person of color on their board and the youth on their board, and and like these three people get tapped to do everything and wind up spread so thin, and not necessarily putting their energy where they want to put their energy, but where their energy is sort of called to. And so I think the more we can sort of meet folks where they are and help folks find the spot that interests them, the more we can sort of, normalize hearing from a full diversity of stakeholders on any issue. I want to encourage panelists to feel free to engage with the Q&A over here. In the Q&A box, feel free to answer questions. Some of them are sort of already in the answered tab, but you can answer them more, or in the open tab, you can answer them. The question about sort of support for towns, want to highlight from the chat box that both the community action agencies and the Vermont Small Business Development Center and our regional development corporations have support for small businesses that are growing. And then our regional planning commissions and our League of Cities and Towns are going to be receiving pretty significant money in order to help towns with planning, with all that money that Olga's question was based around. So trying to make sure that people have the resources to make those like really planful decisions that we've been sort of coming to over and over again here.
You know, Emily, before we move on, I think what for me is so exciting about this conversation, but about the funding that's coming from the federal government, is that it feels like for many years we've been reacting. And this money will allow us to respond, which is why, again, we appreciate all the panelists' responses.
I also just want to, we've had a lot of planning people in the chats, and I think sometimes when we're thinking about what we want for our lives, we like think about childcare and like community engagement and like great sidewalk cafes and getting our needs met, and we forget that like sewers really, really matter. So if you are talking to your sort of towns about town investment or thinking about regional or state investment, like sometimes we really do need to get to like back to basics and like have functioning septic and water systems and broadband before we can sort of build up from there. It's so unsexy, but it's so important.
Emily, I just wanted to piggyback on that, just from personal experience, really trying to start a business in southern Vermont. And that was actually a very large barrier and a real barrier that is going on in terms of getting the space permitted for wastewater. I wasn't able to go forward with the business because it was not set up for a reliable septic system, and so it could not legally operate. So I just wanted to say that that is something that is huge, and it is related to Act 250, I believe, but is something I'm trying to get more information on, and how that part of opening a business, is there anything that we can do to help in terms of the environment along those lines?
Absolutely. And that is another one of the reasons that we really want to sort of concentrate our investment in downtown and village centers, so that we can make that infrastructure challenge manageable. So it's in sort of concentrated places and spaces. I think we're going to go to our next patch of video now.
Hi, my name is Samba Diallo from Brattleboro, and my question is, with the stress of the pandemic this past year, drug use and overdoses have been on the rise. What is Vermont's commitment to prevention and harm reduction programs to help people who are suffering, especially people in rural areas? Thank you.
Well, hello, Samba, and thank you very much for the question. Before the pandemic hit us, we were starting to make real progress, and the tide was beginning to turn just a bit. I'm not saying it was complete success, but we were really turning the corner. But over the last year, we've seen this concerning rise across the nation. And I realize we're going to need to redouble our efforts as we emerge from the pandemic to address this epidemic. So I recently appointed a chief prevention officer, who is a former commissioner of the Department of Aging and Independent Living. She now works in my office and reports directly to me, and she will spearhead and coordinate much of this work. I wanted to elevate it to the cabinet level, someone right here at the fifth floor, as we call it. We need to continue to find ways to enhance our hub and spoke approach that we've been using for quite a number of years, and we built upon. And this has become a national model. A lot of other states have tried to replicate. In fact, I testified in Congress over this, and they were very interested in the success we were showing early on. But we also have to work with local partners and incorporate.
Yeah, I want to tackle the question around the opioid epidemic, and so I know Beth knows as well. The bulk of my work is around opioid response, and so I think collaboration is key. I think among not just our stakeholders, but I think community. I will say in Bennington, the one thing I love about our region is the collaboration. It's amazing. It's the best I've ever seen. And I say that, because I also do work outside of Vermont, New York and Massachusetts, and I'll tell you, it's night and day. And so I want to give kudos to our stakeholders. But the one thing that I find that's missing is more engagement with our community members. That needs to be a primary focus. How can we collaborate with community members? Those that you just go on Facebook, you can see the comments, and how can we do a better job of educating them around the work that we are doing? And I say, with the Bennington Opioid Response Team, there's so much work that's being done, and you hear it all the time. That's, well, what are we doing to tackle the opioid epidemic? What are we doing to and there's, and I think we need to do a better job of just educating the community, and the community needs to honestly do a better job of listening, right? And so that takes all hands on deck approach, and that's something I've always been about, and I hope we can continue striving for.
Thank you. Agreed. We are doing some really good work, and so much of making that good work that we're doing impactful means making sure that anyone who needs to access any services knows about them, and that our whole community is sort of really embracing whatever solutions we have, so that stigma and shame and the disconnection from that is what keeps a lot of us from getting our needs met. Any other thoughts on leadership through any of the catastrophes at hand?
I just wanted to point out, in Brattleboro, we had the Everyone Eats program that took place. I think it just ended. And I felt like that was such a huge example of showing what kinds of food insecurity that we had within our region that we didn't necessarily know about, and the opportunity to provide jobs for all of those restaurant workers, and help in that industry. But I think that that also was a good example of, I think, government funds being utilized in such an effective way, where other parts of the pandemic, when it really hit last year, there was such great community and grassroots actions that took place. And I just feel like that always it takes precedence, and always is what happens first. You end up, things happen because of what's going on in your community, and people taking action themselves and coming together. So yeah, I think that we do that really effectively in Southern Vermont, but also sometimes feel a little bit like, are we getting much attention down here? But we'll take it into our own hands at the same time.
I will say that Brattleboro's, Windham County's great work on Everyone Eats is what created a statewide program that is in every region of the state now. And I think what's so incredible about that program is how need is such a wide open concept, that there's a real acknowledgement that we all have needs for cooked meals sometimes for a wide variety of reasons, and all of those reasons are valid and worthy. Any other thoughts on leadership? What do you want from your elected representatives? Beth?
Well, I was thinking about what Alex was talking about, and also your earlier question about what is the role of government. And I think I just keep coming back to who's at the table, and making sure that we're not talking about people, that we're talking with people. And if we're talking about recruiting people to the area, that we have people who have lived that experience. If we're talking about, how do we make communities more welcoming for refugees, that we're talking with the people in those shoes, that we're elevating them to leadership positions, right? That's the role of leadership, is to make sure that the voices at the table are the experts in the fields, the people who are being impacted, and really listening.
Agreed. Anyone else want to add anything there? So wondering if anyone, are there any questions in the chat or the Q&A that people particularly want to respond to? If not, I will pull one out and start a response, but would love to hear what things are resonating for any of you. It's a lot of scrolling and flashing. And I don't know about you, but I also have other devices that are scrolling and flashing through this process. Virtual life is a wild time. Olga, did anything stand out for you that you want to highlight?
I think what I would like to highlight and it is how so many towns are doing some really wonderful things. And I do wish we had a way to collect these stories so that towns could learn from each other. Because while everyone needs to craft a solution that works for their community, it would be nice not to have to reinvent the wheel every time. And so I think that's what's standing out for me right now, is just really appreciating all the great conversations and wishing we had a better way of sharing them with each other.
I do believe we have journalists and the media who do a great job of that.
We do, but there's so not enough of us.
No, not enough. My understanding is that most of our Southern Vermont papers were just purchased, and maybe we'll see some increased investment in quality reporting as a result of that new investment in our local papers. Here's
That is the hope.
Anyone else want to jump in?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, what about quality of life issues? We've talked a lot about policy and money, but how about what would improve quality of life overall?
You can also say the thing you were going to say before, Alyssa. You don't have to answer Olga's new question.
Well, I was going to point out just that, which could also contribute to quality of life, actually. Someone in the Q&A said, what does the panel think of forgiving student debt to attract young professionals by sector? Maybe there's a way to have a sliding scale of forgiveness based on the length of stay in Vermont. I just thought that was an actual effective, possibly effective idea to recruit people to actually work in Vermont in our current industries, like have that as a possible benefit that could be offered from companies.
So I know Lieutenant Governor Gray mentioned the sandwich generation in her remarks at some point, and my particular experience of the sandwich generation is I'm still going to be paying my student loans when my son goes to college in a couple of years, and I need to bring on new student loans for him. So that's gorgeous. And I think one thing that I want to highlight is that there are actually a lot of employers in Southern Vermont who will pay off student loan debt for folks, a lot of our medical jobs. And people don't necessarily know that until they sort of go in for the interview. It's like hidden deep in the benefits, and it's an extraordinary opportunity. So that's actually something that you can check around about, and is important for people to know about. There are a lot of opportunities for us to, on the state level, can incentivize businesses through tax policy to be offering that benefit to employees. And I think on a state level, we can use a strategy that businesses have used, like, sort of like public service loan forgiveness at the federal level, which, doesn't really actually work. But at the state level, it could look like, you stay here for 5 years, you get this much forgiven. You stay here for 10 years, you get this much forgiven, especially if you're working in a career that we're particularly interested in. And our childcare bill, which just passed the House and then the Senate and then the House, and I think Beth is very familiar with, and I think I've spoken to you about it before, Beth, that has some really great student loan forgiveness built into it for folks who want to go into the early childhood field. If anyone in the audience is just searching for the right career for student loan forgiveness, maybe it's early childhood right now.
I was just going to add it.
Bob, jump on in.
I was just going to add into that, incentive to try and get people to move here by forgiving their student loan debt or a portion of it. I think that's a great idea, especially people that might be living in, other states that are similar to Vermont. Not, you might not get people necessarily from New York City just because of the wage difference. But I think the one real challenge with that is just the overall housing issue. And, if they can't find anywhere to live locally for an affordable rate or buy a home, at least at the moment, I think that would still be, a challenge in getting people here to take advantage of that.
Agreed. And we don't need to just use student loan forgiveness for folks who are moving here fresh. It can be for those of us who are already here and our student loan debt is keeping us from making other kinds of investments like buying homes in our community or, even buying the groceries that we want at the store. Beth, what did you want to say?
I was just saying, if anybody thinks that childcare could be their calling, like reach out. Because we need staff, we need people who are passionate about childcare. The workforce piece of H171, the childcare bill, was so important because it's really important to have high quality childcare, right? And with high quality childcare come strong regulations and requirements and education. And we want parents to feel comfortable and confident that where their child is being cared for is a safe and loving and educational and nurturing place. So I was just saying, if anybody is interested in that, let me know.
So I see a new question in the Q&A about quality of life, and I'm going to read it aloud. On quality of life, have any other young Vermonters found local culture to be surprisingly isolating compared to other places you've lived? My husband and I have experienced this since we moved here in 2016. We found that the self-sufficiency culture of Vermont translates at times to a form of social independence, hardiness, and isolation. I heard in the earlier new arrivals panel that not everyone has this experience, but I've spoken to other Vermont residents that have experienced this isolation. How do we address that isolation if it's a common phenomenon? And I think, this is particularly huge in COVID as, some of us are, I don't need to explain why it's particularly huge during COVID. So thoughts on that? For me, parenting and single parenting was a really powerful way to sort of force my way into making really strong community connections. But I think the hardiness bubble is a hard one to penetrate here in New England. Alex, it looks like you had something.
Yeah, I'll comment on this. So, I've been in Vermont for about 4 years. I'm initially from Buffalo, New York. And so when I moved here, as you can imagine, like any city, and Emily, I'm sure you can relate, just a culture shock. It's, I come from a go to a mountains, right, and greenery, and and I come from a very diverse community, and and as myself coming, identifying as Hispanic, so it's when I came to Vermont, as you can imagine, there's a sense of, there's no one like me around, right? And it took me a good 6 to 8 months to really make any friends, to build relationships. And partly it was because of, I found, Vermonters were, it's a very, at least in Bennington anyway, from my experience, a close knit group of folks, and it's like hard to get into those groups. And so, for me, I got plugged into a young professionals organization, and that really kind of set the stage for me these next 4 years and allowing me to build those community relationships. And it was hard. It wasn't easy. My wife and I did struggle, but it really kind of fell on us to take that initiative to get involved and find those groups, because that wasn't going to come to us. We really had to kind of work very hard to make those relationships and build those relationships. So that was my experience. I will say, 4 years later, it was an amazing journey, and I love Vermont. I love our region, and it's a great group of folks. So that's all I have to say.
I find there's sort of this, story about New Englanders that they're hard to get to know, but then you have friends forever. But how do we, how many years can someone be waiting for that is the question. And I think even for New Englanders, as you know, switch jobs or switch towns, it can be a real journey. So are there thoughts on sort of what infrastructure would matter or how we can each show up differently with each other to really make that difference? Tatiana.
I think that our farms are a huge resource, especially our small scale local organic farms. I know for me, pre-pandemic, going to Earth Sky Tide Farm in Manchester for their live music was a huge moment of feeling like, okay, like there's a community here and I can be part of it, especially, you know, being a mom, being in a space where kids can kind of run around and you're in a beautiful place and with great music. And, you know, I hear from other local farmers that they'd like to support more events like that. And I think, you know, that some support that would be great to help our small farms become community-based places instead of, because the farmers can't leave. So they're stuck there. But, you know, if we can all go and share in that with them, I think that builds a lot of community.
Just want to call some attention to the chat. The Radically Rural movement is doing sort of a lot of this work that I think you're talking about, Tatiana, and there's sort of hyperlinks in there for more work on that if anyone's interested. And Beth Lee from CCV is just there for you with her email address and ready to connect you with recent early childhood graduates if you are interested. So want to make sure that you look there. We have just 3 minutes left here. I am so incredibly grateful to be able to spend this time with you thinking about Vermont's economy and Vermont's future and how we can all show up to make that difference, both in sharing what we need with each other and in stepping up to make some of that happen. Olga, do you have any final thoughts, anything you didn't say, or anyone on the panel have anything that they haven't said yet?
I will just say quickly, thank you to everyone who showed up today and who participated on the panel and participated in the chat. It was just really wonderful to hear everyone's perspective, and I hope we have more conversations like this.
Thank you. And now I think I'm going to turn to Sarah, whose face has come and I think might have some next closing remarks for us. Thank you everyone so much for the time. Look forward to seeing you all in real life soon.
Thank you. Thanks, Emily and Olga, for running the show. Really appreciate it. And you had some really thoughtful questions that I think our panelists did a great job sort of being honest and open about their experiences. And obviously, thank you to the panelists for taking 2 hours out of your afternoon to let us know what you think. I think it's a really important perspective, and we need to hear more of these perspectives. So, you know, any kind of platform we can help give you for that, please let us know. So thank you to the attendees also for sticking with us. This wraps up the first day of the summit, and so I hope you'll join us for day 2 and day 3, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.